Hello and welcome back to the KCC channel. I'm Rob and I hope you are having a wonderful day today. Today, we're jumping into some malicious compliance. Before we start, if you're new here, make sure to hit that subscribe button. It's completely free and you can always change your mind later. But if you stick around, my friend Carmen here might have some cookies for you in the near future. Alright, on to the stories. Let's jump right in. This story comes to us from Original Deadly Sin. Do nothing all night for a ton of overtime? Yep, why not? Little bit of backstory, I worked at the time in an oil change place. They had recently moved managers from salaried to hourly because some managers in different cities were just lying and not going to work while getting the same check every payday. And I warned them that if anything, my pay was going to go way up because I'm here a lot more than 40 hours a week. They were good with that, they said. Well, one night I get a call at 7 p.m., 2 hours after close, from one of my guys who was in the shop after hours without permission and crashed into a bay door, like a garage door. All auto shops have at least a few. He got fired. That's not the malicious compliance at all, just setup. So I came in and investigated. The most relevant fact here was that he bent the door so there was maybe a 4-inch by 4-inch gap. A house cat could have squeezed through. I called our door repair guys immediately. They said their folks were on an emergency after hours call already to somewhere 5 hours away. They could be there in the morning. I said, okay, since this wasn't a danger. The door was in a place not visible from the street. You'd have to be behind our building looking for this kind of thing to find it. Alarm still sets, motion detectors still work. Anyone that broke in through this metal door with a 4-inch gap would have needed tools and was gonna get in even without the gap. We don't even keep more than $100 cash around, and anything expensive to steal was equipment bolted to the floor. Deal with it tomorrow, right? Obviously, no. Called my boss to fill him in, and he said to call the door guys. I told him I did already and tried to explain their situation. He interrupted and told me in super rude and loud words, this dick did not like being called after work or having to do any work ever, just to call them and not bother him again about it. Then texted me to rudely say that I better darn well stay there until they arrive and finish the repair. So, since I was single, had no plans, and was now paid hourly, I clocked the instant I arrived initially. I decided this sounded like easy money. Pulled up 2 comfy office chairs to make a bed or couch, watched YouTube, and did assorted internet scrolling. Slept at normal times pretty comfortably all the way to 8 a.m. They showed up around 9 and fixed the problem pretty quickly. I was already on my regularly scheduled 8 to 5 shift that day, which I finished. So now let's do the math. That overnight waiting 7 p.m. to 8 a.m., 13 hours, all overtime at time and a half. Then my normal shift, 9 hours, all at time and a half. So 22 hours times 1.5 equals 33 hours of pay for doing my normal shift plus internet scrolling and napping that was barely even an inconvenience. My boss sees it come payday and tries to give me a yelling over email for trying to rip off the company, CCing all the big bosses, HR, payroll, etc. I reply to all, explain the situation, include the text screenshot. Suddenly, I'm not the one getting yelled at anymore, and I got every bit of that overtime pay. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called Fizzlefist. It says, and this is why you always get it in writing. I guess OP's lucky in this situation that the boss actually sent them a text saying that they needed to stay. If that part had been done on the phone call and there wasn't a paper trail, it might have not been as easy to get that OT paid out, but I still have a feeling that it would have anyway. And can we just mention that OP's boss really sounds like a dick? I mean, it's your job as a market manager or district manager to handle situations like this. People call you because you're the person who's supposed to know what to do. So handle those situations with grace and don't be a dick. This story comes to us from SquirrelMasta75. Just fix the truck. On my first enlistment in the Army, I was a mechanic. In our unit, we had 3 staff sergeants for some reason. Sergeant T was on the last year of his contract and would be retiring. He was assigned as the motor supply sergeant, a position that was made up so he could ride the pine since we were overstaffed. Sergeant G was assigned as the maintenance supervisor and oversaw the preventative maintenance and repair of the vehicles in the motor pool. The third one was our platoon sergeant and doesn't feature in this story. Every Monday, the vehicle operators would come to the motor pool to perform their weekly vehicle inspections. The mechanics would effect any repairs that were possible at the time, like changing out burnt bulbs, stuff that was easy and could get the vehicle rolling. Then, we would begin performing repairs to any vehicle that had a deadline deficiency, a deficiency that needs to be repaired before the vehicle can be operated. These don't necessarily mean the vehicle isn't operational, just that operating the vehicle in that condition can cause greater problems. Then, we'd fix the rest. Usually, on Friday, we'd order any parts that we needed to repair what was left. After the operators left on Monday, the inspection sheets were divvied up between the mechanics and we got to work. One week, I had a fairly easy workload and got all of my sheets finished by Wednesday. There was only one vehicle that had a deadline deficiency left, and the rest were ordering parts. The vehicle in question had been taken by the operators every day. I called the unit to let them know that the vehicle had a deadline deficiency and needed to return to the motor pool. They were short on vehicles and long on work and had been stalling, so I informed my squad leader and left it at that. I went to the office and began ordering parts. When my work was completed, I would assist other mechanics with theirs. Sergeant G walks in and asks why I was in the office, and I informed him that the rest of my work was complete and I was ordering parts. He asked to see my inspection sheets and started looking through them. I tried to explain about the one vehicle, but he cut me off and said he'd see what the paper said. He saw the deadline deficiency and ordered me out to repair that vehicle immediately. I tried to object and explain the situation, but he cut me off again and ordered me to go out and fix the vehicle. I tried a third time to explain. Again, he cuts me off and says, "I don't want your effing excuses. I want your butt out on the line fixing that effing truck. If I see you doing anything else before it's fixed, it'll be an Article 15. An Article 15 is a non-judicial punishment and can result in reduction of rank or forfeiture of pay. Roger, Sarge, I'm on it. I walked to the rack of manuals for the vehicles, pulled the appropriate one, and found the size of the bolts on the part that needed changed. Grabbed my wrenches and head out to the assigned spot for the vehicle. I laid down right there, raised my tools, and began making wrenching motions with my arms. I did this for over an hour, with some breaks of course. Those were some giant wrenches. I saw people looking at me and pointing. Eventually, someone went to Sergeant T and told him what I was doing, and he comes over to check it out. He watches me wrenching for a minute or two, head cocked. "What are you doing, OP?" "Fixing this truck, Sergeant. It's got a deadline." He was looking at me real funny now, like I had heat stroke or something. "OP, you do realize that the truck ain't here, right?" "Sarge, I know this, and you know this, but Sergeant G doesn't want to hear my effing excuses. He wants my butt out on the line fixing this effing truck." Sergeant T told me to get up and get back to work. I told him that G had threatened an Article 15. He said he'd take care of it. I took a smoke break to give them some time to resolve the issue before I went back to the office. Not sure what Sergeant T said, but G had a scowl on his face when I came back to order my parts. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called Real Ultimate Papo. It says, "Making stupid people look stupid is satisfying, but to do it in the military without getting in trouble must be the best thing ever. Great story. Hopefully he didn't take it out on you afterwards." OP responded to this one and said, "He spent his time trying to make my life miserable even before this, but he did get his comeuppance eventually." This is one of those situations where you'd want somebody video recording what you're doing, because OP's sitting there wrenching on a vehicle that just doesn't exist at that time. Could you imagine having a video of Sergeant T's face When they walk up and take a look at OP, I mean, just the quizzical look on their face, the bewilderment of what they're watching would be completely worth having a video. This story comes to us from Competitive Toe 8233. Fine, we'll gladly let you leave. This happened recently. We have a monthly local basketball event, normally 4 to 6 hours. It is all in good fun, and we often play under the winner stays on rule. Originally, people would create a team and come play. This way, you could play with your friends, but it used to cause an issue with good players only wanting to play with good players, and sometimes bad teams only want to play with their friends, making it uncompetitive. If you come late or don't have a team, you are often treated as a sub. So now LJ, the event organizer, makes sure teams are spread out to ensure everyone gets a chance of winning and staying on. My team consisted of myself, a guy LJ knew from playing in the park, we'll call him Parker, 3 other guys, Tony, James, and Milo, all fake names. LJ thought we were a decent team, as Parker and I play often, as well as Tony being quite tall. We just played our first game and we lost. It was not a big deal, as we often all treat these as a feeler game to see how intense and good everyone is playing. Parker took a majority of the shots because he wanted to play a point position where you start with the ball. I didn't complain, as I wanted to know his play style. The team we lost against was good, but they weren't amazing. Second game comes around, played them again. Parker's doing the same thing and I'm playing well. I have 6 out of our 6 points, playing 1s and 2s. It is a tied game, as Parker is ball hogging and missing. I keep calling for the ball, but he's just forcing shots up with multiple defenders on him. We end up losing and he is hot. He is shouting and complaining about how we should have done better. To which one guy goes, he's not passing the ball. This man has the audacity to then lie and go, "What do you mean? I'm the only one keeping our team in the game." I kicked off and shout, "We had 6 points, I scored all 6 points. Shooting and scoring aren't the same thing." He is now mad and complaining about how we are holding him back. We have now been there for about 1 hour, and one of the guys on the team we lost to has to go for a collection. Parker's still shouting and complaining about how we are holding him back, and talks about how he is now leaving us for a better team. We were more than happy for this to happen. During events, it is often when you have a team, you stick to that team in the name of fairness and don't allow changing. Once this man left, we stopped losing games and went on massive winning streak, beating Parker repeatedly. He was doing his antics with the other team as well. Eventually, the guy came back and they didn't need him anymore. This man then had the audacity to try and weasel himself back into our team. We rejected him under the pretense of, "We already have a full team, sorry." He was livid and went to LJ complaining, but there was nothing he could do because it was his decision to originally leave when he didn't have to. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called Bob Son of Bob. It says, "I really never understood the mental gymnastics that led to people thinking, when the team fails, it's your fault. Yet when I don't put in any effort, I still deserve a part of the reward. And I certainly don't have a need of understanding the mental gymnastics either." OP, I don't know. I think this guy actually was your best player. You know, once he went to the other team, he was still your best player because his deficiencies on that team allowed you to wipe the floor with them every time you saw them. Parker strikes me as one of those people where they look around and think that everyone around them is treating them like a butthole. Hey, guess what, Parker? They're not all treating you like a butthole. It's because you're the butthole. This story comes to us from Jason the Fuzz. "You should think about what you want." Okay. I used to be a firefighter for a volunteer department. The town was small and nothing happened on most days. But I was young and single and I loved the job. I showed up every single time I could. The only person who was there more than me was the chief. As many volunteer firefighters know, when grandma falls down at 3 a.m., you get 1 or 2 people. But if there's a fire, people you haven't seen in months suddenly have enough time to show up. Anyway, that department was a mess. People were always crap talking and backstabbing. Training was a joke. You were lucky to get a PowerPoint once a week. Stuff was stolen often. There was once a whole political coup for some reason. Somebody really wanted power in a small town department in the middle of nowhere. I learned it was best to just stay quiet and do my job, and that was helped when I went to night shifts at my real job. I was working 12+ hour shifts, sometimes 5 or 6 days a week. I still showed up to every run I could, but after 7 years there, I was just done with it all. Everything came to a head when I was scheduled 28 12-hour shifts out of a 30-day month. I was still the second most active member out of 30 people, but I wasn't kissing the appropriate butts, and the management kept trying to get me in trouble. They once threatened to fire me for not turning in some paperwork, and I had to point out that paperwork had been sitting in their mailbox for 3 days. They eventually decided to add a stupid new rule. You were now required to sit at the station for 40 unpaid hours a month. Not doing so could lead to discipline and termination. I didn't bother. I was about 24 shifts into the month and I did not care about their dumb rule. But I realized that I could make it. So I left work, grabbed a change of clothes, and I went to the department. It was about noon, which was midnight to me since I worked nights. I tried to sleep on the rock-hard beds they provided. Not 30 minutes went by when the training officer kicked the door in and demanded that I get up and help with training. My role? I sat on a hose so it didn't move while somebody else practiced the pump controls. A sandbag could have done just as well. An hour later, training finished and I tried to go back to sleep. I was told off again. I ended up hiding in the TV room so I could have some peace and quiet. They found me again and wrote me up, first time in years, for what amounted to not being enthusiastic enough about the job. I endured a lecture while trying not to fall asleep where I stood. I finally got to go sit down when I got a text from the boss at my real job. They wanted me to work that night and wondered if I was available. I thought, you know what, I am available, and I left. A few days later, I got a nasty email from one of the guys who wrote me up, telling me they didn't like my attitude and that I needed to think about what I wanted. I thought about it, and I realized I didn't want to deal with their crap anymore. So I wrote my resignation letter, went back to the station, gathered my personal effects, and I never went back. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called TJamesV. It says, "You were there more than anyone for 7 years, and suddenly you're enemy number 1? How did that happen? Plus, how enthusiastic are you supposed to act for an unpaid job? It's a shame, but good thing you got out. Kinda weak on the malicious compliance, but the spirit is there." OP responded to this one and said, "I consistently annoyed the leadership a little every day because I didn't fit the stereotype of a firefighter in a redneck town. I don't drink, I didn't have a bunch of pew-pews or a big truck, I didn't sleep with random women, and I preferred to talk about books and video games rather than sports." There was a rotating position that I called the department punching bag. Whoever it was would get tons of crap from everyone and would be given the crappiest jobs and would be excluded from any social events. I made it my job to befriend these people, but after 7 years, I was the lucky winner. OP, the thing that gets me in this one is you were accused of not being enthusiastic enough for the job. Okay, you want me to be really enthusiastic about the job? Give me a paycheck. I'm here as a volunteer. I can leave anytime. Volunteer means you don't own me. I can walk away. And I've been the most dedicated person here over 7 years. So, boss, you need to think about that one. This story comes to us from Expensive Geometro. Stack the pallets for high. I used to work as a merchandiser for a national soda company about 10 years ago. One of the biggest problems we had would occur every holiday when stores had serious sales on soda, like getting 4 12-packs for $10. The problem is that there simply isn't enough room in the back room to store enough product on a really busy holiday like the 4th of July. Our sales reps would order way more stuff than we ever had room for. And then it was up to me on how to Tetris it all into the space for us in the back. The way it should have been done is to send multiple orders on days like that as space becomes available. But of course, that means sending drivers to stores multiple times, which costs time and gas. I had one store that had a really strict backroom manager with a no exceptions policy of pallets never being stacked more than 3 high. On this particular 4th of July, we literally had twice as much product than what would fit. So I called my boss and tell him he needs to send a driver to buy back some of the excess load. He tells me to stack the pallets as high as the forklift will allow me to solve the problem. I remind him at this location I'm only allowed to stack 3 high. He tells me to figure it out. Cue malicious compliance. I know that the backroom manager will get lava level mad when he sees this, but it's the boss's orders. So I am up to 5 high when the manager sees it and goes banshee ape crap on me. I shrug my shoulders and tell him it's my boss's orders. I finish stacking, with one tower now being 5 high, then start walking out as my shift is now done. The backroom manager tells me if I leave it like that, we can kiss our account with the store goodbye. I shrugged and leave. I get a call from my boss 30 minutes later that there is a driver on the way to do buyback and I need to go back to that store ASAP. I tell him my shift is done for the day and I have already returned the company truck and am on my way home to see some fireworks. It's 8 p.m. at this point. He tells me to turn around and go get it sorted. I tell him the only way I am going back is if I get double time for the entire day, about 14 hours at that point, plus a 10% raise. He yells at me that it's never going to happen, so I tell him that me returning to the store is never going to happen. I also tell him that if he changes his mind, he can send an email to me agreeing in writing to my terms. I had other side gigs at the time and wasn't concerned at all about this job. I got an email 30 minutes later from my boss's boss agreeing to those terms. It is immediately followed by a phone call from him apologizing that I am needed and I need to go back to the store ASAP. My boss's boss also sent my boss, who was already at home, to help sort the mess out. Hearing him apologize to the backroom manager was gold. Jumping down to the comment section on this one, there's one from a user called Horrifourier. It says, leverage. You had it first on the forklift, then with your boss, and with his boss. Use them all to maximum benefit. Well done. Another user down below called Gemini27 said, I'm darn surprised you managed to make that raise stick. I'd have thought they would scramble to find a replacement pallet stacker and then toss you to the curb. OP responded and said, I saw the 7-Up guy get a DUI at work inside his work truck after hitting a fire truck and not get fired. Those types of jobs are super physical and not many folks stick around, so you can basically get away with murder as long as you show up on time each day. A lot of people when called back into work will just turn around, not question it, go back in, and do the extra work that they're being asked to do. Hardly anybody stands up for themselves these days. So when OP laid out exactly what they needed to go back to that store that day, oh my gosh, that was absolutely amazing for me.